Thanks to the re-election of U.S. President Donald Trump, for the past year, Canada's defense and security have been at the forefront of public discourse. From the ludicrous notion that Canada will become the 51st state, to the very real whimsical imposing of trade tariffs, Trump has steadfastly maintained that Canada must make a massive increase to our defense budget or face his wrath. It is time to target just how Canada could increase defense spending and pivot our purchases away from U.S. arms dealers, and why we probably won't choose that course of action in the end. For his part, Prime Minister Mark Carney has tried to judo flip the equation by agreeing to spend more in total, but less on US-made defense systems. In other words, we'll beef up our defense budget, but take those dollars anywhere but the US. Unfortunately for Carney, not only is that a difficult proposition in the short term, he also has resistance from within the ranks of the senior military leadership. The RCAF are hell-bent on buying the Lockheed Martin F-35 fighter jets, and only the F-35 fighter jets. This is despite the fact that last spring Carney ordered a full review of the remainder of that contract before proceeding. In December 2024, Canada agreed to buy a fleet of 88 F-35s at a project cost of $19 billion, but only contracted the purchase of 16 aircraft at a cost of $7 billion. Following Carney's orders for the RCAF to review the remainder of the order, Saab of Sweden have offered to build 72 Gripen fighter jets in Canada, along with 6 globalized surveillance aircraft. It is an attractive offer. The Gripen came in a close second to the F-35 in the RCAF competition to replace the RCAF's aged fleet of CF-18 Hornet fighters, and is far cheaper to operate than the F-35. The GlobalEye is already based on a Bombardier Canadian-built aircraft. The Swedish proposal estimates the creation of 12,600 jobs in Canada's aviation sector. While there is a lot of public support to scrap the rest of the F-35 and diversify Canada's defense expenditure to Sweden, the RCF brass seem wedded to their coveted F-35s. Last week, the CBC reported that a contract had been signed for the key components of an additional 14 F-35s. Talk about tipping your hand that Canada is not seriously thinking of pivoting to the Gripen. Someone at Defense Procurement should really read a book titled The Art of the Deal. While not quite in the same league in terms of dollar value as the RCAF jets, the Canadian Army also has some hefty buying power in the form of several major acquisitions. The Canadian Battle Group in Latvia is the command element of a multinational NATO brigade aimed at deterring Russian aggression as part of Operation Reassurance. Canada had first sent 800 troops on a semi-permanent rotational basis into Latvia in 2017. However, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, things suddenly got real. What had been created as a notional tripwire deterrent force was suddenly within shooting range of a hostile adversary. Although it took until February 2023 for the Canadian government to formally recognize that what was previously hardware on a future wish list for the Army was now considered to be an urgent operational requirement. This allows the red tape of procurement to be bypassed in order to speed up acquisition. By 2023, the nature of the conflict in Ukraine had become clear. In that near-peer engagement, the battlefield necessities were first-person view FPV drones, counter-drone measures, self-propelled armored artillery, sophisticated anti-armor missiles, low-level air defense. Canada possessed none of the above in February 2023. So, given that all of these capabilities were deemed urgent operational requirements 3 years ago, how much of that kit has been fielded in Latvia? Sadly, there has been no contract issued to date for either FPV drones or drone countermeasures. Testing has been conducted in Ottawa, but the boatloads of FPV drones that our troops needed yesterday remain on the to-do list. Ditto for the acquisition of a fleet of self-propelled howitzers. There is a $5 billion indirect fires modernization project on the books to buy up to 98 155mm self-propelled howitzers, along with new 120mm mortar systems. The Canadian Army scrapped their fleet of aged M109 self-propelled howitzers in 2005. We have not had that capacity since then, and this project remains in its infancy. Canada did fast-track the purchase of Spike anti-tank missiles from Rafael of Israel. Worth roughly $45 million Canadian, the Spike project included flying Canadian soldiers to Israel in July 2024 to train on the missile systems. However, those tests unveiled functionality issues with the missiles that have yet to be resolved. Army planners now hope to have these urgently required missiles in the hands of Latvian-based battle group by mid-2026. Canada had been completely devoid of any air defense systems since 2012. However, the one bright spot in all of this procurement bungling is that in 2024, the Latvia-based Canadian Battle Group received a Saab RBS-70 Very Short Range Air Defense System. It is hoped that by 2027, a full counter-rocket artillery and mortar CRAM system will be delivered and operational in Latvia, utilizing the Saab Giraffe radar system. Last October, the U.S. approved the sale of 26 high-mobility artillery rocket systems, or HIMARS, to the Canadian Army at a cost of $2.4 billion. The sad part about this acquisition is threefold. First of all, because of the backlog on Lockheed Martin's HIMARS international order book, Canada will not receive the first launcher until 2029. Secondly, as discovered by the armed forces of Ukraine, the HIMARS is only effective at longer ranges if you have access to the U.S. intelligence link. The final point is the missed opportunity to pivot away from making another major U.S. purchase. Hanwha of South Korea makes the comparable K239 Chunmo modular artillery system with a similar range and lethality to that of the HIMARS. The Hanwha K239 system was recently purchased by Norway and other NATO allies. No doubt Hanwha could also deliver them before 2029. Urgent requirement indeed. This has been On Target. I'm Scott Taylor. Let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more breakdowns of Canada's defense decisions and global military trends.